We are recording the interview of Art Myers. This interview is being conducted by David Barry from the Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. The interview is being recorded at the First Presbyterian Church in Fairborn, Ohio. It is 1 p.m. on January 10th, 2018. Why don't we begin with where and when were you born?
I was born in Middletown, New York in 1936.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My dad, his name was Arthur also. He was a restaurant owner one part of his life, and then he was a laborer in another part of his life also, yeah. My mother, name is Bina, and she was a housewife until I became a teenager when she went to work at a local store. Yeah.
Did you have any siblings?
I have two brothers, Joe and Gus, or Augustus, his name is, yeah. My brother Joe still lives in the same town that we grew up in, and my brother Gus retired from the Air Force and lives out in Tucson, Arizona.
What did he do while he was in the Air Force, your brother Gus?
He was part of the Titan missile group team, and he was responsible for hydraulics and the silos. And he went all over Arizona where all the silos were and worked in the different ones. Yeah. He spent 17 years of his service at Davis Mountain. He wanted to get out, but he couldn't.
Once you get trained in that certain field, they don't let you leave.
Yeah, that was a problem.
So what were you doing before you joined the military?
I was a nurse in a state hospital, a psychiatric hospital. And one of the other fellows that I went through school with, he worked there also. And one day he came to me, he said, hey, why don't we look about going into the Army? And so I said, well, you know, there's no way to get a higher position here unless somebody dies off. You know, one of those kind of things in the state. So we both went down to New York City to Whitehall Street where the Army recruiting office was, and we went in and we talked to someone. We said, hey, we're interested in coming to service for both nurses. And they couldn't really be bothered with us. They were bothered with other people, you know. So one of them gave us a stack of papers about that thick and said, we'll go home, fill those out, and then come back. And well, we were 60 miles away from home. You know, we didn't want to come back and forth. So my friend found an Air Force recruiter. And the Air Force recruiter took us out to the local air base, which was about 20 miles away, treated us to steak dinner, arranged for a physical, and arranged for our paperwork to be made out. He said, I'll make your paperwork out for you. And I said, this is my kind of organization. So that's how I got the service, yeah.
Did your brother Gus go in before or after you?
After. Yeah, he's my youngest brother, yeah.
Oh. Did your recommendation help him make his choice?
I don't think so. Yeah, he had his mind made up ahead of time, so, yeah.
And then was it that you just wanted to enlist, or were you worried about the draft at all?
No, I wasn't worried about the draft. I was in the National Guard for 8 years before that.
Oh.
I was enlisted, Spec 4, and I was a member of artillery group, and we had 155s, and we first had 105s, and we went to 155s. And my brother Joe, he was in the Army. And he went in the Army about the same time I went in the Air Force.
What did he do in the Army?
He was a tank driver.
Oh.
Yeah. Armored Cal. He stayed his 3 years and left. Yeah.
Did he join, or you said the same time, so do you know why he joined the Army instead of the Air Force? Or?
No, never discussed that, yeah. He joined after I came on active duty. He went into the Army at that point in time. Yeah.
So was it the National Guard then that helped you get through your schooling to become a nurse? Or
No, they did for females, but not males. They paid the females all during their schooling, and the males, they, nothing, yeah. So, but the state where I worked, that's where I went to school. I was working at a mental health institution at the time as an attendant, and I applied for a 2-year course. And I started out in a 2-year course. I got sick and hospitalized, and so I had to drop out, and then applied for the 3-year course from the hospital where I was working, and they accepted me, and so graduated from there. Yeah.
so what made you want to join the National Guard then, doing artillery?
Oh, I was in high school, and it was just a fun thing to do.
Oh.
I mean, we played basketball. We had, parties after meetings. We have hot dogs and beer and stuff like that. So it was just a fun outfit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we went to summer camp. 2 weeks in summer camp, and that was a fun thing to do too. So yeah, we were on call, and they were on 24-hour notice at one point in time to go to Korea, but fortunately this armistice was signed. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So how did your family feel when you decided to go from the National Guard to active duty Air Force?
Well, my father-in-law advised me not to do it. He said, you have a real job, you got a job and it's pretty stable and secure, and you ought to stay. And my dad always said for me to do what I wanted to do my thing, so he had no problems with that at all. And fortunately I went in because 2 years after I went on active duty, the hospital closed down, so I would have lost my job then, probably.
Did you ever go and rub that back in your...
Yeah, I let him know that later on, yeah.
How did your mother feel? I'm sure with all 3 of her sons being in the military, that had to be tough.
I don't know. My mother was real, kind of stable person, and she always went with the flow of things, and she had no problems with any of us being in. Of course, she didn't like us to go away. Of course, yeah. And my mother-in-law didn't like us to go away either. We had a young baby at the time, and we had a dog, and we left the dog with her, and she always reminded me that you took my grandson, and you left the dog with me, so, yeah.
So did you have to go to basic training for the Air Force since you were already in the Army Guard? Or?
Well, they had a basic orientation course for medical officers, which was at Montgomery, Alabama. It was like 3 weeks, something like that. And so I went to that, and then that was on my way to my first duty station. I asked for the East Coast and got Travis. I don't know if you know it, but Travis is near San Francisco. So that's not quite the East Coast.
No, quite the opposite.
Uh,
So did they give you a commission then? Or
yeah, I had direct commission.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
So then, how was your first duty station?
Well, Travis was it was a good duty station. It was a good working situation. I started out in psychiatry there, and then they moved me around to orthopedics and neurosurgery, and back to psychiatry, and back to orthopedics and neurosurgery and that kind of thing. So, but I didn't mind working in different areas. Some people they don't really like to work out of their field or anything, and I always enjoyed working in different areas.
Was any of those more enjoyable than the other?
Well, the psych was easier than orthopedics and surgery, but I enjoyed both of them, really. Orthopedics got me, I was able to do different things there, and it was a good assignment.
Did each of those new kind of titles come with more specialized training?
No, not really. Not I was there. I went in '62, and in 1964 I went to the airvac nurse training school, so flight nurse training. That was at in Brooks in San Antonio, and it was 6 weeks. I think it was here. Then after that, I went back to Travis again. That was only a TDY, but that qualified me, to go to flight school and go to Vietnam later on.
So, how soon after did you join? Did you go to Vietnam?
I went to Vietnam in '69. I joined in '62. I was in the Philippines from '65 to '67. And that's where I really started to be introduced to Vietnam. At that time, we were getting, I was working on Aerovac staging unit then, and we got anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 wounded through there a month. So that was a real tense time, I was originally had orders for Japan, and they canceled those orders, and just before I was supposed to leave, and sent me to the Philippines because they needed a psychiatric nurse there. And when I got to the Philippines, I didn't work in psychiatry. I worked in hemodialysis, which was experimental at that time. My first 7 days of taking care of, or my first week of taking care of 7 guys, 5 of them died on me. So that was real traumatic for me. Really was.
Yeah. How do you get past something like that?
We drank a lot, played football. I was into sports, so I went out and played tennis, racquetball, and those kind of things.
While you're in the Philippines, did you get to have any recreational time, or did you get to experience any of the culture?
We lived off base. My wife, we had an assignment where she would come over, but it took her 9 months to get there. And we lived off base in the Philippines. It was a cantonment area that had housing in it that rented to all military. So it was like a military village.
Yeah.
And commuted to base every day. And the Philippines, can be scary at times. Around election time, you heard machine guns going off, things like that. That's how they get rid of their opponents, apparently so. And we had a situation with the housing area we lived in. The woman who used to take our rent money to every week or month, she was shot. Part of the political thing there.
Did you guys have to have MPs?
No, we hired the cantonment, whoever ran it, hired guards. We had guards at the gate and around the perimeters, and there was walls around the perimeters with broken bottles sticking on the top of the cement, things like that. We didn't have any problems ourselves, but there were some people in the housing area that had some problems from time to time.
I mean, how was it bringing your family over to this new country while you were dealing with all these really hard things during your job?
It was good to have them there, because then I had something else to focus on, and that was good. We had 2 boys at that time, and 3 and 5, I think they were, and it was good to have them there. Yeah.
So, was there anything else that happened during the Philippines that just kind of spark a memory, or?
Well, my work involved, as I say, the dialysis, and after that, I worked in burn cases. That was pretty hard to do, and also with chest, neurosurgery, orthopedics. It was real tough working on the Aerovac, because each afternoon we would get a flight in, and myself and one technician, I had one technician working with me, we would go out, they'd drive up a bus, we'd go out and we'd carry the litters in and put the guys in bed, the 2 of us, with 26 patients. And then we would take all their dressings off, clean them up. Those guys that could go to the shower went to the shower, things like, and put them in wheelchairs, put them in showers sometimes. And we change all the dressings and get them fed, medicated, and settle down for the evening. And then the next morning they would fly out 141s to Japan. Yeah. And sometimes you had more than just the one unit. Like I remember times I'd have a couple of units, which was really, you had to really work like hell, and very little support. Looking back on it, I don't know. I wish I'd thought about it, but there was a lot of civilians on base. A lot of wives and kids, grown kids and stuff, and we could have had them come and help us. They did help at the main hospital, but we didn't have any volunteers down where we were. Yeah.
So,
one incident that I remember. See, the Philippines, when MacArthur was there during World War II, there was a tribe that they used to guard the base, and these the Aborigines type people guarded the base, and they had all privileges of the hospital and the BX and commissary and everything else. And the chief of the tribe, Negritos they were called, his son had a psychiatric problem, so I was working psychiatry at the time, and they sent the son over to a psych unit so we could medicate him and get him stabilized and things like that. And one day I was working. No, I wasn't working. I was off duty at the time, and the chief's son came up missing, and also one GI. So they called me, and they said somebody said they went back to the village. So I took an interpreter with me and went to the Negrito village and found, I talked to the chief and asked him where his son was, and he said, well, he's over there. It was like a hut type thing. And so I went in and I said, the son's name was Danny. I said, Danny, how you doing? He said, oh, good. He said, you sit down and have some rice and Pepsi Cola with me. And so the GI was there, so I sat down, had Pepsi and some rice, and then after a little bit, I said, it's time to go back, Danny, and the GI, and he said, okay, let's go. So took him back to the unit again. That was something else.
So, was Vietnam then your next stop after the Philippines?
No, from the Philippines I went to back down to Texas, and then from Texas I went to the Philippines. I went to Vietnam. Yeah.
Did your experiences in the Philippines, did it make you feel like you were prepared for Vietnam or more nervous to go?
That really opened my eyes to a lot of things for Vietnam, and especially how to deal with the stress of different things and how to use my spare time instead of drinking and stuff like that, like a lot of guys do. I got involved in sports again. Mm-hmm. And then I'd take call for other guys who wanted to drink, so yeah.
And then what were some of your duties in Vietnam? Were they similar to when you were in the Philippines?
No, each morning we would fly out and pick up wounded all over Vietnam. We had a couple of different routes. One went north and one went kind of south and west. And we would pick up wounded and bring them back to the different hospitals along the way, and who would prepare them for flights back to Japan, States.
So you actually got to be in was it a helicopter or?
No, we were 130s and C7s, 123s, 118s. And sometimes we went into little dirt strips where we had to be quick and get out before the enemy got us. So never had any really bad problems with that. Never was attacked or anything. Just shot at a couple times, hole through a wing. That was about it. So it was really, it wasn't bad at all. wasn't being attacked or shot at that much.
Well, I'm sure
Yeah.
your adrenaline was pumping during those missions.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, especially going to a little dirt strip, yeah.
Uh,
And we weren't allowed in helicopters. The flight nurses weren't, because we're so valuable, according to the Viet Cong. And one of the things we had was a thing called a blood chit. It was a cloth with an American flag and $10,000 to whoever helped us and returned us.
Now, was that just kept it in your plane, or did you
Kept it
each
in your
have?
pocket.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought that they were. When I'm thinking about your situation, I'm kind of my mind goes to MASH for.
Oh, yeah, MASH unit, yeah. No, we were out picking people up, taking them from MASH units to secondary places. Yeah. Like Da Nang, Saigon, Vung Tau, primarily Saigon and Da Nang, where they flew out of 141s. Cameron Bay was one also, yeah.
So, you said that you took a lot of shifts for buddies. Was there any like camaraderie that came from that, or just camaraderie from any of the other airmen that you were serving with?
Oh yeah, we had a good time together. We had parties together, stuff like that, you know, and never kept in touch with anyone really after I left there. That's kind of surprising. Yeah, but yeah, I'd take call for somebody who was drinking that night or something. And one night, my boss, he was there, and I said, "I'll take call for you." He said, "Okay." I got called out on an urgent 141 going to Japan. So that was a good flight. I had 2 head cases going there, and my job was to keep them alive during the trip. Yeah. And we landed successfully, and it wasn't a problem. Yeah.
How was it this time not having your family there?
Well, I had gotten used to some of that from being in the Philippines, so, and it was kind of much more difficult than today. Today, you know, you get on Skype and talk to your family. Then we use these little cassettes, you know, and you talked in the cassette, you know, tape recorder, and you send it off, and like a week or 2 later, be back, you know. So we communicated that way at times, and then letters all the time.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've heard about a tape recorder
Oh yeah.
being sent back and forth. That's pretty cool.
It was just a little one about like that, and they had envelopes for them, and especially, you know, you just put them in there and send them. And once in a while, you could call them on, I forget what it was now. It was like a government line, and they'd allow you to call your family like once, twice while you're there.
Now, you had mentioned that through your experience with the Philippines, it taught you how to better manage your time.
Mm-hmm.
So, was there a football team in Vietnam, or how did you?
No, we just
spend your-
we just chose up sides, got a bunch of guys together. We played volleyball and football and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, and then I you know, being in the Guard, I learned how to do things too. You know, how to get things that you wanted. You know, stuff like that. And so that when I first got to Vietnam, the squadron that I was a part of, they had a building that everybody was housed in, and it was just all open bay, and open. It was, you know, open bay shower and everything there, and and then sand blew through the place, and it was hot. There's no fans or anything, but they were really proud of it, you know. And so I was there a couple of nights, and then I found out that they had these air-conditioned quarters. You know, I said, well, you know, these people down here, they're big shots or something like that, colonels, you know, or what? So I went to the housing office. I said, well, what was the requirements for the housing down here? He said, well, you have to fly at night. So I flew at night, and they said, just get a letter from your commander. So I typed up a letter from my commander, had him sign it, and then I had air-conditioned quarters. And all the other guys that I was in a big place with said, where's Myers? He said, well, he's down there. And they were really, what? I said, I've been here 6 months and I haven't got anything like that yet. How'd he get it? He just got here a week ago, you know. So I showed them all how to get air conditioned quarters, and so they moved down there too. And then I always like to do things, so I wanted to build a patio behind my quarters, and they had a self-help program where you could order materials. So I ordered 800 and some bricks and built a patio, a fireplace, and fencing around it. And then I went to the Philippines and brought back Christmas lights and put them up around it. And I had a weightlifting area that I had there. And so you know how to survive in places like that. So it was good. And then being in a guard, I drove, 5 tons, 2.5 tons, and quarter tons of everything else, so I had a license for all that. So to get the supplies, I just went over and requisitioned the truck, drove it into the area, and had them load it, and came back.
Yeah. So you said that when you were in the Guard, you got lucky that you guys were going to get called up, but then the
Right.
Korean War ended.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you at, and how did you feel when the Vietnam War ended?
Oh, see, I was probably that was what, 76, I think, isn't it, for Vietnam? It just ended there.
Or was-
Yeah, I was in Germany at the time, so I was happy that it was over with. Sorry that we lost, so to speak, and just went on my way, So just carried on, because there's going to be another war sometime.
So how long did you end up staying in the Air Force in total?
20 years. Then I had from 1954 to 58. I was in the Guard for 8 years, but 4 of those years they gave me full credit for being active duty. So I had 24 years of active duty instead of 20.
And how was it adjusting to civilian life when you came back?
When I first got out, I tried to get a job on base, and I put an application in for a job that I was doing as a secondary job. It was an additional duty that I was doing, and so they made the addition. When I left, they made that additional duty a regular job for someone. So I applied for it, but didn't get it. And they called me and they said that they had already taken enough applications, although the application deadline was not due. And they said that they had enough applications. They had 3. Well, 2 of them didn't qualify at all. The third one, it didn't really. And it was a job with quality assurance is what it was. It was an affirmative action job that was taken. So I was a little upset about that. And I was upset about leaving at 22 because I wanted to stay longer. But I was on a reserve promotion, so I had to get out. But and then I was working at a local hospital over in Xenia, and the Green Memorial. I was working on psychiatry over there, and then I found out that they needed people for the drug and alcohol program. So I started working on the drug and alcohol program, and that's when I started going back to college for a counseling degree, a master's degree in counseling. But all through my military service, when I was working in psychiatry, I did a lot of group therapy and individual therapy. When I was at Wright Pat, I was an individual therapist for all the enlisted people at the hospital. And I ran the mental health unit there. So, yeah.
Wow.
So my transition from one to the other was pretty smooth, really, because I was working in the same kind of area, doing some of the same stuff. And I went to a couple different hospitals, and and did some education and service education things for them, stuff like that, which I did in the service also.
Did you become a member of any veteran organizations?
Well, American Legion VFW, yeah, that's about it. And I didn't do that right away either. That was years later. Yeah. I don't know. I tried to I shied away from those things, I guess, looking back at it.
What made you shy away from it? Was it the World War II generation maybe not getting along with your guys's, or?
No, I don't know a particular reason. I wasn't one to go around like a lot of guys. You know, they've been in for 3 or 4 years, and they go around with "I'm Vietnam veteran" and all that kind of stuff on their hats and jackets. And I've never been. I've always shied away from doing those things too. Yeah. I don't like wagging a flag, you know, for myself, you know. So.
When you did end up going to the veteran organizations and kind of applying for the jobs on base, was it because you were still drawn to that military structure?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, at that time, yes. And I never tried to get back to that either. I guess that experience kind of hurt me a little bit, because here I was doing that job beforehand, you know, and they turned it into it was an additional duty for me, but then they turned it into a real job, and I wasn't good enough for it. So, yeah, government. And I said that was an affirmative action job, and the guy lasted a year on it, and then they fired him because he didn't know what he was doing. Yeah.
How would you say that your wartime experience has affected your life?
Well, my experience in the Philippines with having those guys die on me affected my life. I still get choked up sometimes about that if I say and talk about it. Other than that, the being in Vietnam, I guess I'm proud of the fact that I went to Vietnam, and have when anyone is around, you know, we always somebody that I know has been there also, have a camaraderie about it. So, yeah. Other than that, I don't know. Right now, I'm working with a group. I'm a member of a group that's working to erect a Veterans Memorial here in Fairborn. So for the 4th of July parade, they wanted a float. So I suggested that we have a float with. I would be a nurse on the float, taking care of an injured guy on a stretcher, and then I had a poster made up, a large poster made up with my Vietnam organization on it, and we were on a float for the parade during 4th of July 2 years ago. So went over big, yeah. And I guess being in Vietnam is being closer to those people that have lost their lives in Vietnam. My brother's best friend came through when I was there. He was he wasn't wounded, but he had renal shutdown and died from that. And there's quite a few that had renal shutdown because of the weather and lack of fluids and maybe dysentery and things like that was in Vietnam. But he came through, and I saw him when he was on his way back to the States at that time. He got back to the States and died. Yeah.
Are there any life lessons that you learned from your military service?
Yeah. If you want anything done, make sure you're doing it yourself.
And then I only have 2 more questions left for you. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
Hmm. Not that I can think of right now. No. That's a real good question. Yeah, I'd have to think about that for a while. Yeah.
Oh, hey, if you think of anything and want to call me back, I'll be more than happy to come
Okay.
back out.
Yeah.
But then my last question, which is also my favorite, what message would you like to leave for future generations who view this interview?
Future generations who view this interview, that war is not fun, and a lot of times you don't have a control of where you're going to be or what you're going to do, but find the positive of it and stay with that positive and nurture that positive so that it's easier to survive that way. And that's what I did whenever I went, like Philippines or Vietnam. I found things to do to nurture myself, yeah. And you have to do that. You just can't sit around and mope and feel sorry for yourself.
Well, this concludes our interview, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this interview, and thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome, David. Yeah, thank you for your service too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.